Hello, this is Andy for Campervan Tango, and this is part 2 of our self-build motorhome step-by-step guide. This guide will be covering electric hookup point, installing the side windows, and installing the wall battens and insulation. Hope you like it. So when I was trying to decide on a place to put the electric hookup point, I know I was going to put my batteries behind the driver's seat, and on the panel work on the van I had a small dint, so I decided to cut the dint out and put the electric hookup point in there. Installing the electric hookup point is quite easy. I just made a cardboard cutout, made sure it had fit in there, and then just traced it onto the side of the van where my dint was. Drilled a hole with a drill and just cut it out with a jigsaw. File up the edges and paint. I drilled through where the screws would go to make it easier for the screws to go through the metal and into the wood that I bonded onto the inside of the van with Sticksall. The piece of wood bonded onto the bike was just easier and stronger for the screws to bind into instead of it just being onto the skin wall of the van. The next job was fitting the side windows. We decided to go for the bonded windows because these were a lot cheaper than the caravan type windows and relatively easy to fit. The first job was to remove the anti-vibration bar from out of the middle. This was quite easy. It was just drill out the spot wells at the top of the bottom and prise the bar out. On our van, it's quite easy to tell where you need to cut for the windows on the inside. So what you need to do is to trace this line onto the outside, and the way I did that was drilled out 10mm holes in a radius on the corner and a couple on the straights, and then when you go on the outside you can just draw a line connecting the dots up, and this is your cut line. So what I did then was just masked up the area, drew the line, and then cut it out with the jigsaw. Once you've got the panel cut out, you may need to squeeze the inner and the outer skin together. If there's a gap of 5mm, you need to sort of crimp it up to make it a lot easier for the rubber trim to go on. So putting the trim on is pretty straightforward. Just knock it on with a hammer, and at the bottom just trim it to fit. Putting the adhesive on for the window, it depends on what kit you've bought. Mine came with a activator which you had to paint around the window where you would be applying the adhesive, and they come with a alcoholic wipe as well for cleaning the window up to get a good bond. So once you've got the adhesive on the van, it's literally picking the window up. I used 2 window suction carriers to lift it up and place in position. Check the alignment and hold in place with gaffer tape. You may need to put a couple of little packers underneath if it starts to slip, and then just leave to dry, which is I think normally about 30 minutes. So before you think about fitting the battens on for the walls, you need to get all your cables in place for your 240 volt and your 12 volt. These should ideally be run in conduit as you go through the ribs of the van. For the 240 volt, I used the 2.5mm 3-core Arctic Flex cable, the blue type, and this is a lot more durable and it stays flexible when it goes really cold, so it's less chance for it cracking and splitting. For my 12 volt appliances, you really need to get the correct cable for what your appliance specification is going to need, and depending on the length of the cable what you're going to use because of voltage drop. For things like 12 volt sockets and USB sockets, I used 28 strand twin wall cable. So when it came to putting the battens on the wall, I used the same method as I used for the floor and the ceiling, where I used the adhesive with the Sticksall with the tile spacer in between and literally forced them into place with offcuts of batten until the adhesive had gone off. I tried to place the battens where I wouldn't be wasting space. When the ply was going to be fitted onto the top, it would clear any thicker main structural ribs. There were a couple of places in the middle of the van on the ribs where it bulged out too far. But when I put the ply across, I just left this cut out. And then when it was carpeted, I just went over with the carpet because I knew that this would be hidden behind furniture. So once I got some of the battens on and I started doing some of the insulation, the first insulation what I used was the 7mm closed cell foam insulation. And this was mostly placed onto the outside skins of the van. And this was put on with high temperature contact adhesive, sprayed onto both surfaces and leave it to go tacky, and then just put it together. So the next part of the insulation, I used the foil bubble wrap insulation, and this again was stuck on with high temperature contact adhesive, sprayed onto both surfaces. But with this, I actually did the ribs as well to try and avoid cold spots where it could form condensation. Because I was putting the bed across the back transverse, I wanted to try and get the maximum length bed I could get in. So I wanted to build a couple of reveals on either side of the van so I could get that extra 6 inches. So when I built that, I actually put the battens bonded directly onto the outside skin of the van and insulated and put the Kingspan type insulation in between and then put the ply stuck to the batten. When I was putting the Kingspan insulation is 25mm and that was cut to go in between the battens and stuck into place with a bit of Insta-Sticks or expanding foam. And any nooks and crannies was filled with the plastic loft insulation. Any really small spaces where you couldn't get the loft insulation in, I used expanding foam. You have to be really careful with it because too much can deform the outside skin, as I've said before. So when I was putting the Kingspan in around the electric hookup point, I cut a little square out of it because I wanted to make it so it was accessible from the back in case there was any problems in the future. So what I did with the doors, the sliding door and the rear doors, was filled it with the plastic loft insulation, but you've got to be a bit careful around the locking mechanisms. And this was put in as much as I could and put a vapor barrier plastic sheet in and taped it on with the foil tape so it was sealed. On the back doors, where the windows would go, I insulated with the 7mm PE foam and then stuck on the 25mm Kingspan. Any little gaps between the Kingspan I filled with expanding foam, and then all the joins was all taped up with the aluminium foil tape to create the vapor barrier. Well, thanks for watching and look out for part 3. Hope you liked it.